this video we're going to look at horizontal and vertical lines, and specifically we're going to look at the graph or the graphing, and then how we write. If we're given a graph, how do we write that equation? So now I've actually given you the setup for both of these. So a horizontal line is going to be y equal to just a number. All right, now we're used to seeing this. We're used to seeing, and you probably don't have to write this down, we're used to seeing y equals mx plus b whenever we write the equation for a line. But there can also be an example or a variation where we say y equals a number, and if it's equal to just a number, that's actually a horizontal line that you're being given. Now, same thing for x equals. We're not really used to seeing x equal to a number or x equals anything for a line, but actually this is a vertical line. All right, so y equals a number is horizontal, just a number. X equal to just a number is vertical. And I mean, the most basic way of understanding these is literally just recognizing these patterns and memorizing it. But I'll try to give you some tips when we actually look at the graph to try to memorize these. So let's look at a few examples. So let's say we have a coordinate plane, look something like this, and we're going to say, okay, this is our y-axis up here, and here's my x-axis. All right, now let's say I give you y equals 3, and I say, okay, I want you to graph that. Now, first of all, you could just have this memorized that when I see this setup, I know it's horizontal. But then you may think, well, that's a little confusing of how to actually go about it, so here's an in-depth look. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to go to y equals 3 on the y-axis. So that would actually be at 0, 3. So we would go 1, 2, 3, and we'll say, okay, that's where my first point's going to be. And actually, it's the only point I need. Then you want to actually think about this in a certain way. So I'll try to write it out for you. So the way we want to think about this is, I want to cross or intersect at, well, we'll just say intersect the y-axis. So I want to intersect the y-axis at 3. However, I want my intersection, or I want the y-axis and the new line I make, I want those to be perpendicular, which means they look basically like a cross. So now, if I were to try to make a perpendicular line with the y-axis, here's the y-axis, which my line's not straight, but you get the idea. Now, if I want to draw a line that's perpendicular to that line, it has to be horizontal, or else those two lines would actually be the exact same. Let me show you what's incorrect. If I were to just basically make a copy over this vertical line, you can see those are right on top of each other. I should never graph my vertical or horizontal line if I use this approach. I should never graph them on top of each other. I should always have one line that's perpendicular with the y-axis, or you'll look when we do vertical, the opposite will be true. So once again, let me back up and just go over all that again. So once again, your thought process is y is equal to 3, so that's where my first point is made. Then I want to cross the y-axis at that point, but I want my y-axis and my new line to be perpendicular, which means y equals 3 has to be a horizontal line. So it would look something like this. All right, let's do another one, and you could probably do this one. Let's say I gave you y equals, we'll do a simple one, y equals -2. All right, so see if you can graph this. Now, once again, you could just memorize this is horizontal. Okay, that's perfectly fine. I know people that do that all the time. It's completely, it's a good way to memorize this. But if you want to actually try to logic this out and have a pattern or a method, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to y equals -2, so that would be at 0, -2, and you're going to make a point. So my first point is going to be here. All right, now, once again, your logic or your thought process is, I want to cross the y at -2. However, I want my intersection to be perpendicular, which means it has to be vertical to be perpendicular with the y-axis. Because once again, I hope you can clearly see this. But if I were to just make a vertical line at um, y equals -3 or -2, if I were to make a vertical line here, I'm actually just going to be right on top of the y-axis, and that's not what I want. I want a perpendicular intersection, so that's going to happen at or with a horizontal line. All right, so now let's look at another one. Let's now switch to vertical. So vertical, let's say I want to do, let me get my colors right. All right, I want to do not y equals, I want to do x equals, let's just say x equals 5. Okay, so once again, you can just memorize this setup and say, well, if it's x equal to a number, I know that's a vertical line, which once again, totally fine. That's a completely efficient way to do this. But now, if I want to actually look at this and try to have a plan of attack, once again, my plan of attack is to go to x equals 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's where my first point's going to go. But then I want to act like, once again, I'm crossing or intersecting the x. So I'm going to cross the x-axis at 5. However, I want to make sure I'm perpendicular with that x-axis. So I want to make sure that I make a cross. And once again, I'll even highlight it again so you can see. Here's the x-axis. If I were to make a horizontal line here, I would make a horizontal line that would be right on top of the x-axis. I don't want that. I want it to be perpendicular, which means I need a vertical line that goes through 5, and so that would be what it looks like. So here, here. All right, let's do one more, and I think we'll probably be okay on this, but we'll see. So let's see. Let's do a negative number now just to mix it up. Let's say x is equal to -1. Okay, so now if x is equal to -1, once again, you could just memorize this and say, okay, this is vertical. Now, I need to go to -1, which would be right here, and that's going to be where my first point is. And once again, we have our y and our x. All right, so now, your logic or your thought process, your method is, I want to cross the x at -1, but I want to make sure I'm perpendicular with the x. So perpendicular, which means make a cross with this x-axis. And the only way that that's possible is to make a vertical line that goes through -1, which mine's not super straight, but it's okay. And then I'll be finished. All right, so now let's look at one more, or I guess a few more examples, just so you can see. What if I gave you this graph and I said, all right, here's the graph. We're going to say that this is 2. So this is 0, 2. And then I have a line that intersects that's horizontal. And you could be asked something like this. It could say, well, what's the equation? So what is the equation for this horizontal line? Now, here's how you can go about doing it. You could just memorize that horizontal means y equals, or look at what's happening. There's only one point that we're intersecting, and it's at y equals 2. My graph is literally going through y equals 2, so that's what the equation looks like. It's literally y equals 2. All right, now, I've had people before say x equals 2, but I always tell them, look at it this way. I'm not even touching the x-axis right now. So if you're not touching the x-axis, you're probably not going to say x equals. All right, now let's look at one more, just to give you one more idea. So let's say I gave you this, and I said, all right, we have a point that's I don't know, right here at 3. So that point's going to be at 3, 0. And then there is a vertical line that intersects that point. And I'm asking you, what is the equation? So what's the equation for this line? Now, once again, this is the x-axis, y-axis. If you notice, I'm only going through one point, and that point is at x equals 3. So that's the equation. Now, once again, just like before, I always think about it this way. I'm not even touching the y-axis. So if I'm not touching the y-axis, then I don't have to worry about even saying y equals. It has to be x equals. So once again, hopefully this video gives you a quick roundup of everything. But remember, it's important if you want to just memorize this. Y equals a number. That's going to be vertical. Actually, I said that backwards. That's going to be horizontal. And then the final piece I would make sure to memorize is x equals a number is going to be vertical.